What crazy story do you need to tell? Years ago I was hitchhiking north of Richmond, Virginia when a car with two dudes picked me up. We got to chatting and it turns out they were headed to their friend's place to shoot guns and asked me if I wanted to join. I asked if his friend would be okay with a random homeless-esque fellow shooting his guns and he said hell, just pretend to be my cousin from Seattle. So instead of sitting on the highway in 100-degree weather, I spent an afternoon eating hamburgers, shooting guns, and blowing shit up with bags of tannerite on some random DoD employee's woodland property. Don't remember your name, dude, but you were the man. Thanks for a great memory. When I was learning to fly at a sketchy flight school, I was doing a pre-flight check flight, close to the end of the program. I was doing the run-up in a Cessna, when I smelled something. Do you smell that? Smells like gas, I say. Instructor 21 years old, shrugs. Annoyed, I open the door, and there is a spreading puddle of avgas under the plane. Shit. The instructor panics, stay in the plane, I'll get help. And runs off. As soon as I got the engine off, I noped out of there, and watched the plane dump all its fuel on the runway. They kindly gave me another plane, and instructor. They fixed their plane, and a month later, I read about the same plane crashing, due to fuel issues, 1 fatality. No significant repercussions for company. A little while back my roommate was contacted by a wealthy man in the area who wanted to pay her to be his live-in pet for an entire month. She thought that this was a cutesy way of saying that it was a sugar daddy baby arrangement. Turns out what he actually meant was that she would be given room, board and a very healthy allowance to spend a large portion of her day dressed as a cat, walking on her hands and knees, eating out of a bowl, using a litter box and, yes, sleeping in a little cage at night. Sex wasn't even on the table. He was only interested in having a human cat for a month. She seriously considered the offer for a weekend, and then politely declined. Edit, this allowance would have covered her college tuition for the semester. He knew what he wanted and was very motivated. Don't know how interesting it is, but a few years ago I'd go to college in the morning and leave at like midnight because I didn't have a PC and needed to work on homework at school. One time on the last train ride home, I had to catch 2 trains and 2 buses each way to get there and back. We were coming into the last station where I'd get off. There was this Asian guy acting a bit strange the whole ride. He gets up and stands in the middle of the car, and as the train brakes coming into the station he falls flat on his face from a full standing position, lays there until the train stops, stands up, dusts himself off and walks out of the open doors like nothing happened. I saw this guy doing it like 5 other separate times, and since I was used to it at that point I enjoyed looking out for the uninitiated riders' reactions. Plenty more slightly weird stuff happened on my late-night subway rides home. I really enjoyed the entertainment. I didn't believe in aliens either till the other day when I saw a huge guy in jogging gear running full pace without swinging his arms. They were just stiff by his sides. It was the weirdest alien thing I have ever seen, like an alien mimicking our movements. I stole my own car back once. I used to restore classic cars. I had the most valuable one I've ever had at Abadi's shop, and he took forever to finish it. He had painted other cars for me, but apparently developed a drug problem. I would check on the car every week to see if there was any progress. Finally, after a year he told me he painted 90% of it, but he's asking for more money than we originally agreed. I drive there on a Friday afternoon unannounced, and see my car outside the shop, worth a ton of money, with the shop owner nowhere in sight. His neighbor told me he had left the car outside for 3 days and several people have tried to steal it. So I call a tow truck and tow it to my garage right away. On my home, the shop owner calls me over and over again. He thought somebody stole the car. He kept calling me for months. I never responded. I was an exchange student in Poland a few years ago. I was freshly 18 and had almost no experience with alcohol. 3rd week of school, we had a dance and I decided to attend. It was not at all like the school dances we have in the US. First off, it was held at a club, downtown. Little odd, but okay. Second, it had a bar. I was in the senior class in high school, and we were all 18, so we could drink. I was not ready for that at all. Third, I had just started smoking the week before. My high school had a smoking gazebo, and probably 1/3 of my class smoked. I started smoking to make friends lol. This turned into the perfect storm of me getting absolutely freaking shit-faced. After blacking out shortly, I was suddenly outside smoking, and my friends and I were walking to a nearby 24 hours liquor store. I walked in, visibly inebriated, and bought a mid-sized bottle of vodka. The cashier was hesitant, but when she heard I was American, basically just said frick it, go ham. Probably another 2 hours and another blackout later the police arrive. They start yelling at my class president for wandering in the road. For some reason, drunk me decides I should get involved even though I barely speak Polish and am super freaking wasted. I walk up to the cop, and in the worst Polish I've ever spoken, tried to say leave him alone. But what came out was leave, and then a pile of vomit all over his boots. Oh frick, this is it, I thought, I'm going to get arrested and deported. The cop looked at me and said in English, "You an American?" "Yes sir," I replied, knowing I was in deep shit. The cop looked me up and down, looked at the bottle of vodka in my hand, and said, "You drink shit vodka. Come with me." I was put into the back of the police car, and he started to drive away. My heart sank. 3 weeks into what was supposed to be the best year of my life, it was already over. But he stopped 2 blocks away, at the 24 Hours liquor store, brought me inside, and bought me a 100 milliliters bottle of Zubrowka vodka. He said, "This is good, and cheap. Welcome to Poland. Now let me take you back to your friends." As we pulled back up to the club, he leaned back and said, "Watch this." He turned on the lights and siren and 3 or 4 kids ran down the block. He was laughing uncontrollably. He unlocked the door, and as I climbed out he shouted, "Be safe, friend." 20 minutes later I blacked out again, and the next thing I remembered was waking up on the kitchen floor of the house I was living in, feeling like absolute shit. My host mother had made coffee and said, "Damn, you had a night, huh?" And that was the craziest night I ever had. Sorry for formatting, I'm pretty shit at it. When I was 22 I had an internship for the Buffalo Wild Wings marketing department. I was also running a lot at this time. Every time I would go and leave for a run I would text my GF that I'm leaving for a run just so someone knows where I am. I get a text from her mid-run asking for a special picture when I get back. I agree. Then I get a text from my female boss making sure I sent out some paperwork, which I did. I get home and I don't even want to take this stupid freaking picture, I just want a shower. But I get butt-ass naked and take a bathroom mirror selfie from head to kneecap and send it with a kiss face emoji. An hour later I get a text from my GF that says, "Did you forget my special picture?" And I'm thinking, no WTF, I sent that. So I go into my texts and... oh no. Oh frick. Of frick me into oblivion. No. I sent the nude to my boss. My heart sank straight into hell. I immediately try to do damage control and say it was not meant for her and that I'm so sorry. I even screenshotted the convo from my GF to show it was a mistake. No response. Went into the office the next day and was called into HR where I was fired. Shit freaking sucked. I had a great gig going. Makes for a great story though. Edit, didn't expect this to blow up. But I see people arguing about whether or not she should have fired me. I don't blame her for it, mainly because of the 1 hour span between the text and my apology. By the time I responded it made it seem like I was saying it was an accident because I didn't get a positive response. But I have some contacts that are friends with her and I guess she felt terrible afterwards. She cried after I was fired. She thought the pic was for her at first, so told HR, but only saw my follow-up texts after it was too late. I just wish she would have known I'm not that kind of person and would have asked if that was a mistake. I was always extremely professional around her. So for me to go from professional to sending a full-body nude with a kissy face would not only be ballsy as frick but also put my job on the line. I would think she would realize that's not who I am. But it's over. No hard feelings. This happened in either the late 90s or early 2000s. So my granddad got jiggy with another woman when he was on holiday once with a lady from Kiribati. Anyway, it produced a child, my aunt. Now several years ago my family decided that we would go and visit her in Kiribati. For those that don't know, it's on the equator. To get there we had to fly from Fiji on a tiny 50-seater twin-prop plane with one toilet at the front. Now being a kid with a lot of food allergies, I had eaten something that didn't quite sit right, mild case of food poisoning if you will. About half an hour into our flight, my stomach gives me that feeling where you know you won't stop what's coming, so I got up, and went to the toilet. Halfway up the aisle all hell broke loose. I farted, which wasn't a fart, it was the beginnings of full-blown diarrhea. By the time I got into the toilet and locked the door, my undies were soaked, it was still flowing, I couldn't stop it. Now I was a good kid so I didn't want to block the toilet, so I threw my undies in the rubbish and unloaded into the toilet. However, the amount that came out plus the amount of paper I had to use ended up blocking the toilet anyway, and it stunk. Really badly. I would have been in there for a good 15 minutes, meanwhile, the entire plane started stinking of shit. I finished up and cleaned up best I could, but the toilet was done for, it was starting to overflow. I just slowly went back to my seat with the entire plane staring at me. Disclaimer, back in the day there was a small amount of water with chemicals to flush with, much more than there is today. A blocked opening means there's nowhere for the poo to go. And no vacuum to suck the shit down, because it's blocked. The more you press the lever, the more chemicals, been saying water as it was faster to type, get pumped in. With the toilet blocked, there's nowhere for it to go except overflow. Now imagine the amount of paper I had to use to block an airplane toilet, and that's why it was blocked. I had to tell my dad what I had done, and he spoke to the flight attendants who had to try clear the mess of a toilet with the water starting to splash onto the floor. It was horrible. We finally got to Kiribati and the plane had to be grounded while they disinfected and cleaned the whole plane as it started to sweat as soon as the heat from outside came in. The plane was delayed for a good while. I only remember this as my dad brought it up the other day in convo. He thought I put my undies in the toilet which blocked it. I had to assure him it was all TP and shit. Dr shit myself on a plane and made it get delayed. My father used to live in Kazakhstan around 2006. One day he was with his work friend at a bar when this tall, built Russian man comes in. He decides he wants to sit in a bar stool close to my dad, but instead of finding a normal, empty stool he goes to a chair occupied by a small woman and literally throws her off the chair, exclaiming that he wanted that chair. My dad sees this and immediately attempts to intervene by saying, "Hey man, what the frick are you doing?" The Russian man then proceeds to tell my dad, "I'm going to kick the shit out of you when you leave the bar," etc. My father brushes it off, but then he notices that the Russian man's friends have started to join them. About 4 large men inside and another 4 outside. At this point, my dad is nervous and decides to call the head of security, HOS, for the company he works for. Keep in mind my dad was the managing director of Kazakhstan at the time. The host tells my dad wait at the bar for him to come, and after some tense drinking with the work buddy, 30-some bodyguards start pouring into the bar, making a line for my dad to the exit of the bar. Because of the country they are in, the bodyguards all have pistols on them as well. So the 30-something bodyguards have made a wall of people either side of my father. After the host takes him to his car, but there was an additional 2 black BMWs that were there to escort my dad home. Not the most insane story, but it was insane to hear my dad tell it to me. He also said the urge to flip off the big Russian guys was massive, but he didn't want to risk it. I was traveling in Honduras with a girl I was seeing. We were traveling with her sister and some other people, staying in a hostel. During the September 15th celebrations in this little town, there were a whole bunch of festivities going on, so we went out and enjoyed the day. At night, walking back to the hostel, we started to fool around a bit. We were making out in the town plaza. We couldn't go back to the hostel to take it further since our friends were there, but it was really dark outside, and the town plaza had some columns and areas that were relatively private. So we just decided to have sex there. We start banging, in between a couple of the columns. So she is leaning back against a column and we are kind of on the ground. After a little while, she starts shaking and I look at her and she has this weird look on her face and is shaking like crazy. I think, whoa, she is having the craziest orgasm I've ever seen. Then I felt a really strange sensation all through my legs, and I think, whoa, I'm having a really crazy orgasm too. I had this sensation I couldn't really place, but it was familiar. Then I placed the sensation. Electricity. I realize I'm being electrocuted through my legs. I was wearing a condom, and I look at her and realize she is too. I pull us both to the side. I looked at the column she was leaning against, and there were exposed wires coming out of it. She was kind of crying and freaking out because she thought she was going to die and couldn't move. And that's how Op and his girl discovered their new fetish. I'm a pretty avid cyclist, which means whenever I have the time, I will ride my bike away from the city I live in, into the mountainous suburbs to challenge myself up some of the local climbs. It was another one of these excursions. I had just rode up and down a big-ass mountain, on the road headed back to the city center. I was fairly tired, still had 40 km to get back home. All of a sudden, I see traffic on the opposite lane stop for some reason. What I immediately saw next I was not prepared for. I saw an ostrich on my lane, in front of me, running after the car ahead. WTF, it's not like the country I live in is habitat to any ostriches. Slowly, I follow the ostrich, which is running after the car ahead, faced with a decision: do I overtake the ostrich? Now I'm no expert on ostriches, but I do remember reading that ostriches run really quickly, and that they can be aggressive towards humans. I don't want to become the victim of an ostrich attack, but I do want to get home quickly, as it was starting to get dark. After hesitating for a while, I gave it all I had and overtook the ostrich. The rest isn't that interesting. I managed to get home unharmed. But to this day, it remains one of my most surreal experiences, running into an ostrich on a bike ride. When I was 19, I would deliver drugs for a friend of mine. One of the guys I delivered weed to worked at the local zoo. One day we decided to smoke up in the somewhat hidden area behind the indoor penguin enclosure. After the sesh, we went inside to find the penguins acting very weird. Turns out we were smoking right next to the air intake for said penguin enclosure. And that was the day I accidentally hotboxed some penguins. And that's how the penguins of Madagascar were made. My parents are blind optimists. They think nothing bad will happen to anyone in our family. One day I got jumped by some losers in a gang. I go home and tell my parents and they look at me and say, well, there's fried chicken in the oven. Unbelievable. I was 14. Here goes, it's quite a long one. I'm from Belgium and have traveled a lot with my parents when I was younger. When I was still together with my ex-GF, we traveled a lot as well, but neither of us had been to the USA. So we told this to a befriended couple and a few beers later we started planning a trip to go on together. Because another mutual friend was studying in Philadelphia for a year and we might as well go visit him. First, we went to New York and Philly for a few days, then took a plane to LA, rented a car, and took a road trip through Cali, Nevada, and Utah. During this road trip, we'd often laugh about some of the dumb shit we'd heard or seen people do in America. We had a bunch of jokes about people in smaller villages and all kind of crazy stuff they might do. We had just been to Sequoia National Park, and we were looking for a place to spend the night and eat, because it was getting late. Found some old farmhouse where we could stay in one of the fixed-up cabins and asked the old lady who rented it to us where we could go and eat something. Mind you, this little town was called Pinehurst and had an extremely low population. She pointed us to the Pinehurst Lodge, which was basically the only restaurant bar store for miles. Went there, ate an amazing meal, and decided to grab some drinks afterwards and shoot some pool. As we were playing pool, this old giant approaches us, wearing a jean shirt that said George W. Bush, picture of an eagle. He had a bushy mustache. Looked very tough for his age, and we thought he was going to give us trouble about using the pool table and laughing too hard. He is to this day one of the kindest people I've ever met. He asked if we were having fun and if he could join us. He bought us moonshine, which we obviously thought was hilarious, and we bought him a few beers as well. Had a blast the entire evening. While we were playing and drinking, the phone behind the counter kept ringing, but none of us was paying attention to it. By 23:30, all of a sudden, a woman comes barging in with a gun in her hand, looks at us, and stomps over. I felt myself getting nervous and getting ready to react if I had to. She stops behind our new friend, grabs an empty beer bottle, and smashes it on his head. We were all perplexed with what happened. She proceeded to shout insults at the man and started hitting him. He calmly tells her to relax, turns towards us, shook our hands, told us that if we ever came back to be sure to let him know so we could hang out again, and then went outside with the woman. As we stood there, still trying to understand what just happened, the woman at the bar just shouts at us. That's his wife. He's a bit of a social butterfly and she had already called 10 times to ask when he'd come home. We thought it was pretty cool and all, so we told her, oh, okay. We're just going to leave as well then, it's getting quite late. Oh, no my dearies, it's best you stay a little while longer. The shouting you hear outside is still them arguing, and I can tell she's quite pissed at you guys because she blames you that he hadn't come home yet. And I have to say it wouldn't be the first time she shot at someone for keeping him too long at the bar, so best you stay a little bit until they leave. So we stay about 30 more minutes, all the while they keep shouting outside. Then we hear a car start, and see a white truck speed off. Within seconds we see a second truck speed after the first one. This was in the mountains, with very narrow and bendy roads. Both cars just leaving at an insane speed. We hear the bartender say, "She drives our children to school with the bus, you know. This would never happen at home. 100% would go back to Pinewood Lodge in a few years."